Hello. If you're watching this guide, you're probably new to Archipelago and would like to set up a session to play your favorite game, either solo or with friends. The purpose of this guide is to help you get started with installing Archipelago, gathering player files, generating the multiworld, and hosting the session for you and/or your friends. First off, what is Archipelago? Archipelago is a multi-game, multi-world randomizer suite. Archipelago reads player configuration files called YAMLs that you and your friends provide and creates a randomizer session between all of them. This entangles your game's items with a friend's game world and vice versa. It's a lot like having an island in the ocean where you send and receive helpful supplies to and from your neighbor's islands, also known as an archipelago chain. You could open a chest in Risk of Rain 2 and find a friend's Megaton hammer for Ocarina of Time. Or maybe you complete a bonus barrel in Donkey Kong Country 3 and find your friend's StarCraft 2 Marines. Any number of supported games or combination of them can be mixed together, even with repeats. You can also play supported games as a single-player experience this way, but the real fun is with friends, right? Using Archipelago, you can play a session simultaneously called Synchronous or Sync Multiworld, or separately called Asynchronous or Async Multiworld. And you can resume any session at any time without losing your overall progress. Everything is saved server-side, so players can connect and disconnect from the overall multiworld at will and without disrupting each other. Finally, you can play single-player games together. Let's get started. All links referenced in this video can be found below in the description. First things first, we need to install Archipelago. Navigate to archipelago.gg in your browser and click on the yellow link that says Source Code. This will take you to the GitHub page where the project's codebase is hosted. This page has a lot of background information about Archipelago if you'd like to learn more about the project and its history. But what we need for installation is the Releases section on the right-hand side of your screen. It's very important to download the most recent version, which should have a tag called Latest next to it. Click on the most recent version, and the page will navigate to a changelog for that version. Here you'll see a list of the changes in the most recent version. To download the most recent version, navigate to the very bottom of the page, where there is a section called Assets. From here, download the version that matches your operating system. For the majority of you on Windows, this will be the setup.archipelago.versionnumber.exe file. There are also installers for Mac and Linux, which function in a mostly similar manner. Additionally, if you are savvy enough to compile code from its source, the source code is also available. This is only recommended for advanced users and gives you the ability to test features that are in production. However, that is well outside the scope of this guide. Go ahead and click on the relevant installer file, and it will download onto your computer. Run the .exe file you downloaded to start the installer. You'll need to accept the license agreement to continue. On the Select Components screen, you can pick which components of Archipelago you wish to install. The core files will always be installed and are necessary to play most games in the Archipelago ecosystem. The Generator section is an optional way to create randomizer sessions on your computer instead of using the website. This tool is handy for troubleshooting problems with player files, as you can get an error log for any sorts of issues you may have with them. If you wish to play any of the ROM-based games and generate multiworlds that contain them, you'll need to select these games under the Generator section. For any ROM-based games you select in either the Generator or Client sections, you'll be asked to provide your legally sourced ROM file for the relevant game in the next step. You can also select just the Generator and none of the sub-options if you don't care to play or generate any of the ROM-based games. The server option allows you to host an Archipelago server on your own computer. The port forwarding and network aspect of that is beyond the scope of this guide, but if you want to play single-player games using the Archipelago software, this is the one way that you can do it without having to use an internet connection. We consider the WebHost to be considerably easier overall for most users, but this option is great for local play. We'll cover the functions of the server more later on in this guide. I recommend installing the server for convenience later, but you can always run the installer again to add it at a later time. Clients are how your game connects to the Archipelago server. You need a client for every game that does not have one built in, such as through a direct mod or a website connection. For example, Risk of Rain 2 uses a mod manager program called R2 Modman to give you an in-game connection menu instead of a client. Therefore, it does not show up in the installer and has its own separate setup process. Many of the games instead require a client which you can install through this installation menu. If the game you want to play is listed in this section, installing the client for it is mandatory in order to play that game. Select all clients that you wish to install. Additionally, you can install the text client, which allows you to connect to any Archipelago server using a text window. This allows you to run server commands more conveniently for certain games that don't natively support text chat or otherwise don't already have a separate client. You can also use this to be an observer for a session. We recommend most users to install the text client. After you've selected all of the options you wish to install, click on Next and the installer will ask you if you wish to create a desktop shortcut. This isn't mandatory, but you get a very helpful link to your Archipelago install folder, which makes it easier to find quickly. If you've already installed Archipelago before and are running the installer to update to a new version, you should reselect components you already had, as this will update them with their newest changes, which are sometimes required in order to connect to Archipelago servers with these clients. If you don't select previously installed components, the installer will give you a warning dialog which will explain that the previously installed components will not be uninstalled. Next, the installer will list all of your selections so you can review them before starting the installation process. Double check to make sure that what you want to install is included. Click Install, and the installer will do all the rest. The installer may prompt you to provide the location of any ROM files you have legally obtained for the purposes of running any relevant randomizer patches for these games. You may also see a command window open up during the installation for some components, particularly Minecraft comes to mind. Follow any prompts that show up to progress the installation. Once the installer is complete, you've installed Archipelago. So, what do you do with the program now that it's installed? It depends largely on what you want to play and how you want to play. Each game has its own setup guide to follow depending on what the game in question needs in order to connect to Archipelago. There's a tutorials page that shows all of these setup guides so that you can get into the game that you want to play quickly. As a general good practice, we recommend putting most of your Archipelago games, ROMs, or shortcuts leading to them, where possible, directly into the Archipelago folder that gets created during the install, for ease of access later. This simplifies file pathing in some games, specifically like Factorio. Before we move on to explain what to do with your YAML files to generate a session, let's briefly explain what YAML files are. A player configuration YAML file is a short human-readable text file that is used in Archipelago to tell the generator what kind of game you want to play. You define your preferred settings and can even set weights to those settings to make your experience as random as you would like it to be. Every player submits their own personal YAML file, and that rolls them into the session before the Multiworld gets generated. There will be a separate guide on how to create your player configuration YAML file, but if you want to work using a basic template, you can find one for each game in your Archipelago install directory, in your Players Templates folder. You can use any text processing program to open and edit these. I recommend either Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code. The colors are pretty and it's a lot easier to look at than Notepad. But pay attention to the indentation and spacing when you format these. YAML files are invalid if they don't conform exactly to these formatting rules. You can always verify that your YAML is a valid file by visiting the YAML validation page. If you create your player YAML file on the website, it should always give you a valid YAML. However, some of the more advanced settings and features may require editing a YAML file manually. Please refer to the Advanced YAML Guide to get a better picture of what is possible using advanced configuration settings. Be advised, the Final Fantasy I YAML is a special case as it works very differently compared to the other games. Seek out the FF1 setup guide for more information if you wish to play it, as the template YAML will not work without using the FF1 website to generate it. There are several different ways to generate or host a session of Archipelago. On the WebHost at ArchipelagoGenerate.exe, you can generate your session on the website by uploading a .zip file or archive of all included player YAMLs. Or you can upload a session that has already been generated locally to use the WebHost as your server. The third option is to generate the Multiworld locally and host the server on your own machine. This is considered an advanced use of the software, and it is assumed that the user understands how to do things like port forward and navigate the connection setup on their own. However, generating and running multi-world servers locally at the connection address localhost is a great way to play single player, even with multiple or even numerous games. Any of the three generation methods will work, they just have different benefits as the host. We'll walk through all three of the options one at a time. The first and easiest way to generate a session is to simply collect everyone's player YAMLs, bundle them all together in a .zip file. I recommend 7-zip for this, but as long as you output a .zip file, it doesn't matter which program you use. And then upload that .zip file to the Generate Game page found at archipelago.gg/generate. When you generate your game on the website, it will ask you about a handful of settings for the session, like hint costs, permissions for forfeiting or releasing, collecting, and other settings. Hovering over the question mark symbols gives a description of each option. You can find any and all of these options locally in your host.yaml file, which is relevant when you generate locally instead. For now, set these options on the web page as you wish for your session, and upload your collection of player YAMLs as a zip file using the Upload File button. From here, the website will attempt to generate your game. Or rather, your multi-world. If it fails to generate, you'll receive an error message explaining why. Feel free to seek assistance in the tech support channel of our Discord server if you need help with this. A link to the server is in the description below. If generation succeeds, you'll be taken to a page where you can choose to create a new room, and then give that room page to all of the players that are participating. Congratulations, you're ready to play. Use this option, generating on the web host, if you don't need to do anything fancy and already have everyone's valid YAML files on hand. Here are the other two methods of hosting a session. Let's first explain how to use the local generator. The website or web host can do all of these functions, but it's very helpful to know how to generate your games locally, as it can help diagnose issues with YAML files and is the best way to test your YAML file that it does what you want it to prior to joining a multi-world session. Additionally, you can only host sessions with more than 20 game worlds if you generate it locally first and then upload to the web host. The first step is to check that your host.yaml file and edit this to configure your settings for the session. You can find this file in your Archipelago folder. The web host offers these options in a clickable menu as described above during the Generate Game page portion, but your host.yaml file performs these functions when generating locally. Options like hint costs, whether or not various Plando options are enabled, and even the forfeit and collect permissions are set using this host.yaml file. Most of these settings can be left as is, but you may prefer them to be set differently, and the host.yaml offers you a very fine control over how your server settings are configured, even more so than the web host. Once you're satisfied with your settings, make sure to save the host.yaml file before closing it to ensure you keep your settings. The Players folder is where you can put any and all YAML files you wish to include in a randomizer session generated locally. Place all of them for the session in that folder loosely, meaning don't zip them together within that folder, and then run ArchipelagoGenerate.exe. A terminal prompt will appear showing the progress of the generation. If successful, the window will self-close and a .zip file will appear in your output folder. If for any reason the generator fails, an error log will appear, and the generate window will not close down automatically. Typically, generation failures will happen because of invalid YAML formatting, and the error message will point to exactly where the issue is in the file. You can get help with this in our tech support channel in the Discord server, where you will probably be asked to provide the relevant log file found in your logs folder. The file will be the most recent one called generate_and seed number. Assuming everything went well, though, you can find your newly generated multiworld in that zip file in the output folder. Now that you have a generated zip file for your multiworld in output, you can choose to either upload this to the WebHost as is, as we mentioned before, using the archipelago.gg uploads link, or you can host it locally. If you're uploading a pre-generated session to the WebHost, your host settings from your host.yaml will be inherited and used on the WebHost, as well as when you play locally. All you do is create a new room and then divvy out the room page link to anyone participating in the session, have everyone connect, and you're good to go. Use this option if you want to customize your host settings in a way that the WebHost option drop-downs don't offer, like custom hint costs, or possibly to host advanced configurations like running from source. This option reduces overall traffic on the website and conserves resources. The final and third option is to host the Archipelago server locally on your own machine. Extract the .zip file for your session that was created in output, and you'll see multiple files appear. Any and all patch files for yourself or any other players needed will show up here when you extract this file. These vary by game, but you'll need to distribute them to your friends in order for them to play and connect to your server. Alright, you will also have an AP_seed number.archipelago file, which you can open to start the server. This will appear as a terminal window. Players will only be able to connect to your server when you have this server window open. While the server does automatically save progress at regular intervals, it is a good practice to generally always do a /save command when you're done, or a /exit command to properly close down the server and preserve your progress. This will always create an updated AP save file and allow you to resume progress the next time. The connection information for your locally hosted server is configured using the host.yaml, and explaining how to set up your network for this purpose is beyond the scope of this guide. One last note, if you're connecting to a server that you're hosting on your own machine, you'll use the connection address localhost. This is a great way to play single player, as it doesn't require an internet connection. We recommend going with this option for hosting if you need to connect people directly to your machine for their session instead of the website. This could be necessary for any number of reasons like firewalls, local area network, or if the web host is down for any particular reason. If you can't access the website, this is your go-to. Well, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching this guide. There are a lot of moving parts involved with Archipelago, but once you've done a multi-world or two yourself, this will all feel a lot more familiar. The point of setting up the program this way is to give the user the most possible flexibility with your experience. We hope you enjoy Archipelago, and if there's anything we can do to enhance your experience, please come visit us at our Discord at discord.gg/archipelago. Thank you and have a great day.